The knock at the door was sharp, deliberate, and far too early for a Saturday morning. I opened it to find a man in a neatly pressed polo shirt and a clipboard tucked under his arm. His expression was neutral, too polished, like someone rehearsing authority. "We need to talk about the ramp," he said, not even glancing at me as he surveyed the front of our home. I could already feel my chest tightening. I knew what was coming. Behind me, my daughter giggled, soft and high-pitched, as she played with our golden retriever. She sat in her wheelchair, the morning sun glinting off the freshly painted handrails of the ramp we had built just months ago. It wasn't fancy, just functional, safe, her freedom. "The HOA has received multiple complaints," the man continued. "The structure violates neighborhood aesthetic standards. It's considered an eyesore." An eyesore. The word hit harder than I expected. As if the ramp, this bridge between isolation and the world, was a blemish. As if her existence, her need, her joy in rolling down that slope to feel the wind on her face was something to hide. I clenched the doorframe. "That ramp is the only way my daughter can leave this house." He blinked, as if what I said didn't register. "I'm just enforcing the guidelines. You'll need to remove it within 30 days. From behind me came the familiar squeak of her wheels, and then her voice. "Daddy, are we going to the park today?" My throat tightened. I looked at him, this man with his clipboard and his rules, and I knew in that moment I wasn't going to fight just for a ramp. I was going to build something they couldn't tear down, something that told the world, she belongs here. Before all this began, we were just a small family trying to find a sense of normal. I'm a single dad, been that way since my daughter Ellie was 2. Her mum left when the diagnosis came. Spinal muscular atrophy. At first I thought it was some long clinical term that meant we'd just need more doctor visits or a special stroller. I had no idea it would mean learning to carry a child who would never walk, rethinking every corner of our home, and constantly fighting against a world that seemed built without her in mind. But Ellie, she never complained, not once. She's the kind of kid who makes you believe in miracles, even if you're not the praying type. She loves to draw. Always something colourful. Always something with wings. "So I can fly in my dreams," she'd say. And she reads every animal book she can get her hands on. She can tell you the difference between a barn owl and a snowy owl just by the shape of the wings. She makes everything feel lighter. Even when my back aches from lifting her in and out of the car, even when money's tight and the nights are long, she laughs, and the world softens. When she turned 6, I realized I couldn't keep carrying her in and out of the front door forever. The steps were steep, and she was growing. So I started researching ramps, safe ones, sturdy ones. I applied for every assistance grant I could find, sold a few things, worked extra hours. It took weeks of planning, but eventually we got the permits, bought the materials, and a kind contractor named Luis helped us build it one weekend for free. He had a daughter in a similar situation, said it was the least he could do. The day it was done, Ellie wheeled out for the first time, her arms raised like she was on a roller coaster. She laughed so hard, the kind of laugh that echoes in your chest and stays there. "I feel like I'm flying," she shouted. That ramp wasn't just wood and nails. It was freedom. It meant she didn't need to wait for me every time she wanted to feel the sun or check the mailbox. It meant independence, dignity, and choice. I thought the hardest part had been getting it built. I thought we had crossed a bridge into a new chapter of ease, even joy. I didn't realize how quickly someone would try to take that away. Not because it was unsafe, not because it blocked a sidewalk or offended the law, but because it didn't match someone else's idea of what beauty looks like, because it broke the illusion of perfection on a suburban street, because someone saw it, and instead of seeing a little girl's liberation, they saw something inconvenient. They saw an eyesore, I saw my daughter flying. It started with a note in the mailbox. No envelope, just a neatly folded sheet of paper with the HOA logo stamped in the corner and a polite tone that barely disguised the condescension. "We appreciate your recent construction efforts," it read, "but please be advised that all exterior modifications must align with neighborhood aesthetics. Your ramp was not approved through the proper channels and is not in compliance with architectural guidelines." I stared at the words, trying to figure out what exactly they wanted from me. I had followed the county's requirements. I had the permit in a drawer. But the HOA wasn't about legality. It was about control. The next week came another letter. This one was firmer. A notice of non-compliance, citing a subsection I'd never heard of that talked about maintaining the visual integrity of the neighborhood. Apparently our ramp, built with care, painted a soft neutral to blend in, was somehow a disruption. A disruption in a sea of identical lawns and cookie-cutter porches. The language was cold and clinical. No mention of Ellie. No consideration for necessity or compassion. I tried to reason with them. I called the HOA office and asked to speak with the board. The woman on the phone sounded bored, as if she was ordering coffee instead of denying access to a child. "You're welcome to attend the next board meeting," she said. So I did. I showed up on a Tuesday evening, sat through 40 minutes of budget updates and flowerbed discussions before they finally brought up my name. They didn't say Ellie's. They said, "The structure at Lot 46. One man with square glasses and a clipped accent said, "It sets a precedent. If we allow it, others will want to modify their homes without approval." Another chimed in, "It impacts the resale value of nearby properties." I sat there, gripping the edge of the folding chair, biting the inside of my cheek. I wanted to scream, to ask them if they'd ever had to carry a child down icy steps just to get to a doctor's appointment, if they'd ever had to tell their daughter that she couldn't go outside because Dad's back couldn't take another lift that day. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They weren't listening. A few days later came the third letter, the one that finally broke me. Due to continued non-compliance, the ramp must be removed within 30 days. Its appearance is inconsistent with neighborhood standards and has been described by multiple residents as an eyesore. That word again, eyesore. I read it out loud, then tore the letter in half. Ellie looked up from the floor where she was coloring and asked, "What's wrong?" I didn't know what to tell her. That people who had never met her, never heard her laugh or seen her light up on that ramp, had decided her freedom was ugly. I wasn't going to let them define what beautiful looked like. Not for her, not for me, not for anyone. At first it was quiet. No one said anything outright, but I started noticing the looks. The subtle pauses in conversation when I rolled Ellie down the ramp. The way some neighbors began avoiding eye contact, like disagreement was contagious. Others smiled a little too hard, offered comments that felt rehearsed. "She's such a strong girl. Must be tough, but you're doing great." It was as if they were trying to straddle both sides, afraid of picking the wrong one. In this neighborhood, silence was often the safest response. But not everyone stayed quiet. Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down left a plate of cookies on our porch with a handwritten note. "My grandson uses a chair too. If they don't see the beauty in what you've built, they're not looking hard enough." I held that note like it was armor, read it 3 times before tucking it in the kitchen drawer. For every kind word, though, there were mutters at the mailbox. The occasional conversation that trailed off the moment I approached. A few nights later, someone left an anonymous note taped to our garage door. "Play by the rules like everyone else." Ellie sensed it. She might have been young, but she wasn't naive. One afternoon, she looked up at me and asked, "Do they think I'm ugly too?" The question hit like a punch to the ribs. I crouched down beside her, brushing her hair behind her ear, trying not to let her see my eyes welling up. "No, sweetheart. You're the most beautiful thing on this street." But the words felt small against the shadow growing around us. People started choosing sides in quiet ways. The Martins stopped inviting us to block parties. The couple across the street stopped waving. But then Luis, the contractor who helped us build the ramp, showed up with a fresh coat of paint and said, "Let's make it even better." A few kids from the neighborhood asked Ellie if they could try painting on the side of the ramp with her. She smiled for the first time in days, handing them brushes. There were cracks forming in the HOA's pristine facade. This wasn't just a fight about wood anymore. It was about who got to belong, who got to be seen. And I realized then that protecting Ellie wasn't enough. I had to make sure her presence echoed loud enough to drown out the silence. That night, after Ellie had gone to bed and the house fell silent, I sat on the couch, staring at the ramp through the front window. The soft glow from the porch light traced its edges, and for a moment, it looked like something sacred, something more than just a structure. My chest was heavy, not with anger anymore, but with the weight of helplessness. I had followed the rules, I had explained, I had pleaded, and still, they wanted to take it away. They wanted to erase her path to the world, all for the sake of uniformity. I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, stared at the ceiling, listened to the steady rhythm of the house breathing around me. That's when I remembered something Ellie had said weeks ago, when she first rolled down the ramp and shouted, "I feel like I'm flying." She wasn't just talking about movement. She was talking about freedom. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, that helplessness shifted into something sharper. Not rage, something cleaner. Purpose. They wanted to call her freedom an eyesore? Fine. I'd give them something worth staring at. I wasn't going to fight them in courtrooms or tearful meetings anymore. I was going to create something so honest, so vivid, they couldn't look away. I sketched it out on a pad in the kitchen, lines crooked with fatigue but bold with resolve. A new design, bigger, brighter. Something that didn't just say, "We exist," but screamed it. I would turn the ramp into a monument, not just to Ellie's spirit, but to every child who'd been told they were inconvenient, every parent who'd been made to feel like their child's needs were too much. I'd build something no rulebook could erase. I thought of Ellie's art, her love for color, for animals, for stories. I saw it all there in my mind. The ramp wrapped in painted vines and butterflies, flowers blooming from its railings, a wall beside it filled with her drawings, a declaration that this was her space too, that this home, this street, this world belonged to her just as much as anyone else. That night, I didn't sleep, but I wasn't tired. I had something to build, something sacred, something they couldn't tear down. The next morning, I made calls, not to lawyers or HOA reps, but to friends, to Luis, who had helped with the original ramp, and to the art teacher at Ellie's school who had once said her paintings deserved to be on walls. I told them what I had in mind, a transformation, not just a ramp, but a living piece of art, a monument to courage, to childhood, to inclusion. Some hesitated, unsure if it would stir more trouble. But others, they jumped in without question. Luis arrived first, measuring tape in hand, nodding as I explained the new design. "It'll take time," he said, "but if we're doing this, we're doing it right." We widened the base, reinforced the railings, added flower boxes to the sides. Ellie helped paint them in pastel colors, lavender, seafoam green, sky blue. Her hands were streaked with color, her cheeks flushed with joy. Soon the art teacher showed up with brushes and a few of Ellie's classmates. We set up a canvas wall next to the ramp, and Ellie began sketching her world, owls, trees, stars, and rainbows. Each stroke told a story, not just of her, but of every kid who had ever needed help, and been made to feel like a burden. The mural took shape over days, layer by layer, while neighbors slowed their walks to watch. Some shook their heads, others smiled softly and said nothing. But a few brought lemonade, offered extra brushes, or just said, "It's beautiful." We didn't ask for permission. We didn't need to. Every nail we hammered, every color we brushed, was a declaration that beauty doesn't come from conformity. It comes from meaning. Ellie came out every morning in her chair, waving to the growing crew like a tiny forewoman on site, her giggles cutting through the tension that once weighed down our block. It wasn't just construction, it was reclamation. We were taking back space, carving out something honest in the middle of artificial perfection. The HOA might have built fences, written rules, drafted letters, but we were building something stronger, something that couldn't be undone with a vote or a fine. We were building belonging. And Ellie, she was leading the way. They didn't wait long to respond. Within a week of the mural going up, a certified letter arrived. This one wasn't folded or tucked gently into the mailbox. It was delivered in person, handed off by a courier with a solemn expression, as if he already knew what it contained. I opened it at the kitchen table while Ellie painted just outside the window, blissfully unaware. The letter was colder than the last, stripped of any pretense of politeness. It accused me of willful defiance, of non-compliance with multiple HOA mandates. They had scheduled a formal compliance hearing. "Final warning," it said. "Failure to remove the unauthorized structure will result in escalating fines and potential legal action." I went. Not because I believed it would change anything, but because I needed them to look me in the eye. The meeting was held in the community center, under fluorescent lights that hummed like a swarm. 5 board members sat in a row, papers stacked in front of them, expressions unreadable. They didn't ask questions. They read from scripts. They called it a violation. They called it a disruption. They used words like precedent and regulation. But never once did they say Ellie's name. When they finished, they asked if I had anything to say. I stood up, reached into my jacket pocket, and pulled out a photo I had taken 2 days earlier. Ellie in front of the mural, her hands covered in paint, smiling with the kind of joy that didn't just light up her face. It lit up the whole world around her. I set it down on the table in front of them. "This isn't a structure," I said, my voice steady. "It's a lifeline. It's a declaration that she exists and that she matters. You can call it non-compliance. I call it dignity." I looked each of them in the eye. "And if you want to tear it down, you'll have to look her in the eye too." Silence filled the room. One board member cleared his throat. Another adjusted her glasses. But no one said a word. I walked out without waiting for a decision. I already knew the answer. They had power on paper. But we had something stronger. We had truth, and a community that had started to remember what compassion looked like. The morning of the unveiling was unusually warm, with a soft breeze carrying the scent of fresh paint and spring blossoms. Ellie was up early, her hair in braids, cheeks pink with excitement. She wore the sunflower dress her mum had sent for her birthday, a rare but appreciated gesture, and clutched a pair of safety scissors like they were royal jewels. We'd tied a yellow ribbon across the bottom of the ramp, not because we needed ceremony, but because this felt like more than a project completed. It felt like a moment. A line drawn in time, before and after. Neighbors gathered slowly, some out of curiosity, others out of quiet support. Luis stood off to the side, arms crossed and proud. The art teacher arrived with a few kids, each of them holding up small signs they'd made. Messages like, "Love lives here," and "Art belongs everywhere." Someone brought cupcakes. Another played soft music from a speaker in their pocket. What started as a quiet gathering soon felt like a celebration. Ellie did the honors. With a smile so wide it almost erased the months of tension, she cut the ribbon and rolled forward. The ramp now shimmered with life. Vines and blossoms climbed the rails. The flower boxes overflowed with marigolds and lavender. And the mural, oh the mural. It was a swirl of colour and wonder, owls flying across a starry sky, a girl with wings soaring beside them, trees growing into galaxies. At its centre was Ellie, arms raised, smile beaming, painted as the hero of her own story. People clapped. Some wiped their eyes. A woman from down the block approached me quietly and said, "I didn't know how to speak up before, but thank you for doing it for all of us." Even a local journalist had shown up after hearing whispers of a community standing up to its own reflection. He took photos, asked questions, and promised to run a story later that week. The HOA board didn't come, but their absence said more than their letters ever could. That day, Ellie didn't just roll down a ramp. She glided across something built with love, defiance, and hope. It wasn't just for her anymore. It was for anyone who'd ever been told to stay quiet, to fit in, to make themselves smaller. The monument stood tall, and no one, not even the loudest rulebook, could tear it down. In the weeks that followed, the ramp became more than just an entryway. It became a gathering place. On sunny afternoons, kids would draw chalk galaxies along its path, tracing stars and spirals around Ellie's wheels as she laughed and rolled through their imaginary universes. Elderly neighbours began using it too, finding its gentle slope easier than the original stairs. No one asked anymore whether it belonged, because now it simply did. Strangers began leaving flowers near the mural, sometimes notes tucked beneath the blooms. One said, "For every child who needed a voice, thank you." Another read, "This gave me courage. We didn't know who left them, and we didn't need to." The ramp had started speaking for itself. Ellie would sit outside sometimes, watching the world go by from her perch at the top, her sketchbook open, fingers smudged with pastels. She once told me, "I feel like a queen here." And she did, greeted with waves, given space to shine. People no longer saw a wheelchair first. They saw Ellie. I walked outside one evening and saw her silhouetted against the sunset, wheels nestled between flower boxes, her mural glowing in the fading light. And in that moment, I understood something deeper than defiance. We hadn't just built something to resist the HOA. We had built a symbol that turned resistance into beauty, a statement that said, love doesn't always follow regulations. That dignity can't be voted away. That presence matters. They had tried to call her freedom an eyesore, tried to make her small, but instead we built something louder, stronger, more lasting than their rules ever imagined. We built a path for Ellie, and in doing so, we built a legacy that would outlast any rulebook and echo in every wheel that rolled over it. If you've ever been told that your love, your child, or your truth doesn't belong, build anyway. Build boldly, beautifully, without apology. Don't wait for permission to make space for dignity. When they call your fight an eyesore, let your actions become art. Let your voice become shelter. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that compassion is louder than conformity. And if this moved you, stand with us. Speak up. Speak out. Because no one should ever have to ask permission to be seen, to be heard, or to belong. Love, when built right, becomes unshakable.